Hi, I'm Dan Shapiro with Sparkbuy, and I'm here to talk to you about life outside the safe and happy confines of the App Store. Now, the drawbacks of the App Store model are pretty well known at this point. You've got criteria that can sometimes be a little vague and confusing. People aren't really sure what works and what doesn't. In order to get started, you've got to put something in there, wait for it to get through. It can take a while, a week or longer. Before you even submit your item, you've got to go and pay up your $100, buy your Mac, even if you haven't made any money yet and aren't sure you're going to. And when the money does start coming in, you're going to owe 30% of the proceeds for the privilege of using the platform. What if I told you there was another way? A way that you had access to tens of millions of handsets all in one fell swoop, where you didn't have to compete for placement on the top 10 list, you didn't have to spend money on marketing budget or ad buys, a way where your penetration into the mobile market was virtually guaranteed for years to come. Well, such a thing does exist. It's the wireless preload, where your software actually shows up on the handset from the moment you buy it, and it's a whole different world. Instead of vague and capricious and arbitrary guidelines, there are no guidelines whatsoever. In fact, there are dozens of people who can independently veto your project for any reason or for no reason. When you're working with these guys, carriers, handset manufacturers, it typically takes about a year to convince them to sign up and put your product on the phone. And once they do that, it can take 2 to 3 years additionally for that phone to go through the manufacturing process and get to market. The startup cost is the good part. It's free, but you're going to be running a company of about a dozen people for 3 years with no revenue. And last but not least, the revenue split. That 30% looks pretty good when you're talking about 40 to 70% of your revenue going to the host carrier, OEM, or whoever it is. Where can I sign up, right? Well, there are some tremendous upsides, and to kind of illustrate this, let me give you a case study about a company called Swipe. You may be familiar with Swipe because they make an awesome keyboard for touchscreen phones and tablets that's been pre-installed on tons of devices. You've probably got it on your Android device if you've got one of those. Swipe was founded by a guy named Cliff Kushler. Cliff invented T9, which is the predictive text thing that you and 4 billion other people had on your flip phones for the past decade or so, right? It's the thing that predicts what you're going to type before you type it. He sold that company for $250 million. Then he holed up in his garage for 6 years working on the Swipe technology. When he came out, he hired this guy, Mike McSherry, to go and productize it and bring it to market. Now, Mike is the best guy you could ask for to do this kind of thing. He actually co-founded 2 different wireless carriers, and he knows this stuff better than anyone. He proved himself because in 6 months from signing on, he got a deal to pre-install the Swipe technology on the very first phone. That was in 2007. That phone, that first phone, shipped in 2010, 3 full years later. That's how long it takes to go from signature to manufacturing to handsets to software, all the way through to the end. But by the end of 2010, Swipe had shipped on more than 10 million handsets. And they're poised to double or even quadruple that in the coming year. It's hard going, but the rewards are immense. If you want to do something like this, you need to know the ecosystem behind it. We'll start with the one you probably know best, the wireless carriers. It turns out there's actually quite a few wireless carriers. Over 30 in the US alone. Some of them quite small, these rural guys, but they're often the ones who like to innovate and are willing to take the chances to start out with a startup's work for the first time. So what do these folks do? You may think of carriers as people who provide the data and voice signal on your phone. It's true as far as it goes, but as far as depth of understanding, it's like saying Lady Gaga is famous because she has a great singing voice. There's something there, but there's a lot more to it. See, these carriers think of themselves as systems integrators. They consider their job to put together all the different pieces of the experience so that it works well together. Everything from the internet backbone to the towers, to the handsets, to the technical support call, to the insurance on the handsets, so when the whole thing goes south, you get a refund. Now, these guys are trying to put it all together in a bundle where you don't have to worry about the pieces, where you don't need to worry whose app store you're using or who runs the call center in India or who makes the LCD on the keyboard. They want it all to be one happy, branded experience at one very unreasonable monthly rate. Now, I mentioned the handsets. These are the second big folks in the room in this business. The handset manufacturers, guys like Nokia, LG, Samsung, Motorola, the fruit who must not be named, these are all folks who are out there manufacturing the handsets. in a talk about wireless outside the App Store. I'm not going to spend too much time reading from the Book of Jobs. Suffice to say, they're writing their own rules, and most of what I'm talking about with traditional handset manufacturers doesn't apply. These guys are also systems integrators, but of a different sort. They're putting together like the keypads, the actual plastic rubber, the batteries, the wires, the operating systems, all these things into a package to delight and inspire their customers, who are the wireless carriers. Think about it. Over 90% of phones in the US and 50% of phones worldwide are purchased by the carrier. You may think that buying a Samsung phone makes you a Samsung customer, but you're buying it from Verizon. And the person they need to please most in order to get the check cut is Verizon. So this creates an interesting sort of dynamic. Now, they have their own suppliers. The next folks we'll look at are a little smaller in the ecosystem. It's funny to call them that because they're very big. But these guys, Google, Microsoft, and Qualcomm, are the OS vendors. Now, some phones like RIM with their BlackBerries, Nokia with their Symbian devices, they use their own in-house, the companies use their own in-house operating system. But these folks are ARMS vendors. They build the operating systems and sell, or in the case of Google, actually pay the different handset manufacturers to include their code on the devices. But at the end of the day, they are supplying software into the OEMs. They act as a supplier to them. The last one I'm going to mention is actually the folks who are going through probably the most change right now, and that's the retailers, guys like Best Buy and Amazon. It used to be that they'd take whatever the carriers were selling, package it up in a nice pretty cardboard box, put it on the shelf, and that was that. But the times are changing. Now, they're actually getting handsets from the OEMs. They're getting operating systems from the OS vendors. They're getting apps. And they're putting this all together in their own packages with their own brands. Why are they doing this? And what do all these folks have in common? They all think that the path to future success is to not act as a supplier, but to fall in love and get you to fall in love with them. They want you. They want the customer relationship. They want the brand awareness. They want to be the ones who you think of when you think about your wireless phone. And this creates some very interesting opportunities. So let's talk about how you can take advantage of this ecosystem and get a wireless preload. There's really 3 different opportunities. The first one is on the cost side. These folks are spending billions, and if you can find a way to save a tiny percentage, they're going to be your best friend forever. For example, a company called QPass made a billing system that was more efficient than the carrier's in-house billing systems, saved them a little money on every transaction. They got sold for over $250 million to Amdocs not too long ago. The second opportunity is on the revenue side. Let me tell you about a company called Sequent. I met the CEO of Sequent really early on when he first joined the company. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. We were both pitching for angel dollars, and I asked him what he did. And he kind of got a funny look on his face. And he said, you know, I just joined the company, and when they told me what they did, I kind of laughed at him. And I'm kind of worried you will too. And I said, no, tell me it's okay. We're startups. We're all in this together. And he said, well, we make enhanced caller ID services. You know how when somebody calls you and you don't know who they are, you see their phone number. Well, with our software, you see the phone number and where they're calling from. I said, just trying to be optimistic, so I said, whoa, that's an interesting problem. You've got to figure out how to make the GPS work, and how do you keep from draining the battery, and what if the phone you're calling from has the service and the one you're calling to doesn't have the service? And he was just sort of sitting there with a thin smile on his face. And I said, wait, you're not just like doing a lookup table, right? I mean, that's like 20K, it's just a table. And he just kind of kept smiling at me. Well, turns out that lookup table is now pre-installed on more than 45 million phones. To put that in perspective, Angry Birds is 12 million. No wonder the little guy's pissed. So that lookup table, silly though it may seem, just got sold for a 9-digit exit. And that's because although they have to give up the majority of their $1.99 a month revenue to the carriers, they bought virtual ubiquity with that. The simple fact that people who try the service, 10% of them go on to buy it for $2 a month, makes them go everywhere. The third opportunity is in that connecting together people with their customers. My last company, don't have that slide. My last company, Ontella, now PhotoBucket, did that with carriers by actually telling them that they could connect better with their customers by having a cloud service that synced their media to the web, which made them more relevant to the lives of the consumers. And that's what they all want. The carriers, the handset OEMs, the operating system providers, and the retailers all want that connection. They all want to be more relevant to you. And so if you can promise them that, you've got a great way to go and get your code onto those handsets. So there's really 4 things you need to know to be successful in this space. First off, You've got to have one target and one pitch. It doesn't work to try and sell the same thing to everyone. They're at war and they want loyal mercenaries. Second, you want wireless veterans on your team. It's great to have creative outsiders at the start, but you're going to need a couple of hardcore folks who've been in the business for years and know how it works. Third, you need the right financing. It takes $10 million to get to market. That means VCs with the patience and dollars to make it happen. And fourth, good luggage. Between CTIA, CES, 3GSM, carrier visits, customer visits, you're going to be racking up the frequent flyer miles. It's daunting, but it's pretty amazing. That's what life is like outside the App Store. Thank you very much.